This is the theme with Joe Biden, which we are going to see over analyzing his charts really quick, that like what he has been through, what has wounded him in his past lives, contribute to his hidden desires in this life and also his responsibility. Stuff has happened to him being in a position of power before, which does correspond directly to what my intuition has picked up on from his galactic astrology. What is up, Starseeds? It's Sid, and today we are going to be going over Joe Biden and Donald Trump's birth charts. I have pulled up their tropical charts, their sidereal charts, their draconic charts, and a while ago I pulled up their galactic astrology charts and did a video on TikTok, so that's what inspired this video, because 3 minutes on the clock app is nowhere near what I can get into on YouTube, which I love to do. The main thing we're going to be talking about is their past lives. We're going to be comparing them. What has Donald Trump been in a past life? Where has he been in his past lives? What has Joe Biden been in his past lives? Where has he been? So I guess we're just going to go over just a little few key points in their other astrological charts. I mean, I feel like that's probably been interpreted a lot by different people, so I don't want to get too in depth on just their overall astrology. I mean, Joe is Scorpio sun, Taurus moon, using tropical Western astrology. He's a Sagittarius ascendant. And the main thing I notice about Joe's Western chart is that he has a lot of planets in his 12th house, okay? Like, and when I look at charts, I'll leave a link to my favorite calculator, but I look at the major asteroids and dwarf planets as well. But I mean, aside from even the asteroids and dwarf planets, he has his sun, his Mercury, his Venus, and his Mars all in Scorpio in his 12th house. And I look at the equal housing system, just to clarify that. I want to point out he has a lot of things in retrograde. His Jupiter's in retrograde, Saturn's in retrograde, Uranus is in retrograde, Pluto is in retrograde, interesting enough, and the nodes are in retrograde, as well as for asteroids and dwarf planets, Eris, Sedna, Haumea, and Makemake. Interesting that Makemake is in retrograde as well. He does have his ascendant opposite Uranus with an orb of just 0 degrees 24 minutes, which I think kind of makes him kind of quirky and just like weird seeming. And for some people, it's like, that's an awesome trait, but for some reason, Joe, it's really awkward with Joe. I don't know why. He has his Chiron square his Venus, and he has his vertex octile his Uranus. So he also has Lilith sextile Chiron. So his hidden desires, they go hand in hand with like what has wounded him in his past lives. This is the theme with Joe Biden, which we are going to see over analyzing his charts really quick, that like what he has been through, what has wounded him in his past lives, contribute to his hidden desires in this life and also his responsibility. And that's why it's interesting that like his turning point is octile his Uranus, and it's like that quirkiness is what is like, can we get this turning point? Can we get the presidency? Can we get this, status, really? Because I feel like that's his turning point. His vertex is in his 8th house, in Cancer, and it's kind of close to Makemake as well, which is in retrograde. So it's like his turning point is overcoming. It has to do because it's so close to Makemake, which is in retrograde. For some reason, intuitively too, I just feel like Makemake is a big thing for him. And Makemake is the asteroid about overcoming natural disasters. How do you rebuild from that? So I feel like his turning point is overcoming these natural disasters, and just because of, who he is, we can interpret that it has something to do with his political career. Let's look at his 10th house a bit. Midheaven is in his 10th house. It's in Virgo. So, his 10th house ruler is Virgo, and Virgo, when I think of Virgo, I think of Mercury. Mercury is in his 12th house. So it really does go back to that. And I think that's interesting. And then where is his moon? His moon is at the edge of his 5th house, about kind of childhood traumas. Usually I look at 4th house, which, speaking of 4th house, his Ceres is right on top of his IC. I look at the IC to see where you've come from before, somewhere nurturing. So you can definitely see that there's some trauma from this nurturing and child experiences. Just because of the way the moon is in the 5th house and then it's in Aries, and the only thing that's really in that 4th house is right on top of the IC and it's Ceres, you can tell that there's like this weird trauma, and who knows what he's been through this life in his childhood. I don't know much about Joe Biden at all. We're gonna see where his Chiron is. It's in Leo, and it is in his 9th house, right at the edge of his 9th house. It's right on top of his Sappho as well, which is about sensuality. So that's just, it's kind of interesting that Chiron is in Leo. So I feel like stuff has happened to him being in a position of power before, which does correspond directly to what my intuition has picked up on from his galactic astrology, which we'll get into in a little bit. That was just a little bit about Joe's Western astrology. I guess we will take a look at his Vedic real quick and Draconic, and then we'll hop into Trump, and then we're going to go over their past lives. So Joe's sidereal astrology, Vedic astrology, he is still a Scorpio sun, but now he is an Aries moon, and he is a Scorpio rising now. So interesting. I mean, everything we talked about before is still the same with the aspects and whatnot, but we'll take a look really quick at his nakshatras. So Anuradha is the nakshatra that his sun is in. Ashwini is the nakshatra that his moon is in. Vishaka for Mercury. Anuradha again for Venus. Swati for Mars. Chiron is in Maga. Lilith is in Ardra in Gemini. His Rahu is in Maga, and then his K2 is in Shatabisha, which is a little interesting. An ascendant is in Anuradha as well. IC is in Purva Bhadrapada. Descendant is in Rohini, and midheaven is in Uttara Falguni. So that's just a little bit about Joe's Vedic astrology. We're going to take a look at his Draconic. So Draconic for Joe, interesting. Sun is in Gemini. Moon is very beginning of Sag, 0 degrees 50 minutes. Mercury, Venus, and Mars all in Gemini, as well as his sun. And then his ascendant is in Cancer for Draconic. So very cool. We're going to look at his aspects. So this is what I noticed about Joe for Draconic astrology. His chart, his Draconic chart, is quincunct his regular natal chart with an orb of just 0 degrees 8 minutes. That is a very close quincunct, very small orb. So it's like, when I say his chart is, I mean Pluto is quincunct Pluto, Neptune is quincunct Neptune, etc., throughout the whole chart. So what does that mean? It means that his past Draconic astrology is your soul overall. Kind of like a mean. Adding up all of your past lives, bring them down kind of to an average representation. I like to say Draconic astrology is just your soul overall. Kind of, it tells more about your distant past lives, because Western tropical is very on the surface, what you're coming into in this life. Vedic, again, it's what you're coming into this life. It tells more about predictions and accurate life events, and also recent past lives, I feel like. And then Draconic is like on your soul level. Let's get down to the deep root. So that's why, Western is so great for like, what's your personality? Vedic can get into that as well, but more predictive. Draconic, deep stuff. So he's been through things in his past that are just like, to like what he's doing now. It's kind of like a, and also with his Pluto being in retrograde, he's evening out past life karma. That's people, any planet in retrograde is significant. Pluto in retrograde, in my experience, means that like you're gonna go through stuff this life that you agreed to. You're dealing with more karma this life than, say, people who weren't born during a Pluto retrograde. So let's see what other significant aspects he has. His draconic Neptune is conjunct his natal moon. His draconic Venus is sextile his natal Chiron. And his draconic moon is square his north node and south node, his natal north and south node. Also, his moon is quincunct his natal Lilith. And then his moon, draconic moon, is sextile his natal Neptune. His sun is trioctile his natal Mars. His sun is biquintile his natal Mercury with an orb of just 0.7 degrees. His draconic south node is square his natal Lilith. His draconic north node is square his natal Lilith. His draconic south node is quincunct his natal moon. And his draconic Lilith is quincunct his natal Chiron. So this just amplifies this Lilith Chiron energy, which is like, just for him especially, like the intuition is coming through strong on him too. Like I feel like if I didn't know him, I would still definitely pick up on this weird 12th house imprisonment energy, kind of puppet energy especially. But knowing it's Joe Biden, it amplifies that feeling even more. But like I said, I swear if this was an average person who I didn't know anything about them, I would definitely pick up on that 12th house energy. Something with the Chiron. I would think that they've probably been through a lot. I mean, yeah, in past lives. His Chiron is trine his natal Venus. His Chiron is quintile his natal Saturn. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, you guys. So it's his responsibility to go through the stuff that he's been through before. But like, it brings out natural talents in him though. Like so this tells me that he's been in a similar position that he is now, probably for work because it's Saturn, but it's some responsibility. Your responsibility usually has to do with your work, could have to do with other responsibilities, but that's usually what it is. So he's had similar responsibilities in past lives because Chiron is about what you've been through before. Saturn, like I said, responsibilities. What he's been through before is bringing out natural talents in his responsibility now. So this tells us that he has done similar things before. His ascendant is biquintile his natal sun. The way he comes across, it kind of brings out some, like before, in past lives, his personality helped frame how people see him in this life. Ooh. Yeah, juicy. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say about Joe Biden right now. We will get into his past lives later. We're going to do a quick overview of Donald Trump, and the reason why I'm doing it like this, back and forth, is because, I mean, we're only going to go back and forth, Joe, Trump, because we are going to compare their past lives in a few minutes. So we're going to do a quick overview of Trump, and then we'll get into both of their past lives. So, Trump, we're going to go over his Western chart really quick, tropical astrology first, then we'll get into Vedic and Draconic, just like we did with Joe. So, Trump, he is a Gemini sun, Sagittarius moon, using Western tropical astrology, and then his Mercury and Venus are in Cancer. His ascendant is in Leo, no surprise there, right? So right away, I noticed something very cool. His Jupiter is in his second house. He also has Chiron in his second house and Neptune in retrograde in his second house, as well as the asteroid Juno. But anyways, Jupiter in the second house means he's rich, basically, you guys, because second house is about wealth and trades. Jupiter is the planet of blessings. He is financially blessed. The Neptune in retrograde is interesting in the second house though, and maybe we'll see what aspects he has to Neptune in a little bit to kind of clarify that and see what that is about. Chiron in the second house is interesting as well. I don't feel like I've seen a lot of people's charts with Chiron in the second house. but that just makes me think that he's come from money before as well, or he's been in a position where he was involved in trading and things like that heavily before. So let's see what else he's got. His IC is in his third house. Chiron retrograde in the third house in Scorpio. And then we have in the fourth house, it's in Sagittarius, we have Lilith, we have the moon, and we have the south node. So the moon and the south node are right on top of each other. So that makes me think that he's come from a lot of intuition. Like, he's very spiritual and intuitive in his past lives. So that's very cool. And Lilith being in Sag in the fourth house, I feel like he likes to travel, but he does have like a sweet spot for home. And then let's see. We have his part of fortune is right by his descendant. It's in his sixth house still, but it's right on top of the descendant almost. So that makes me think that he values a partner who is also wealthy, but that's what he admires in other people is how they achieve fortune and fame, really. And it's interesting because it's still in the sixth house. So he achieves fortune and fame. It's in Aquarius. I mean, through being a little unconventional at times, but also service at first. So yes, he's come from money in his past lives, but this life he did work to get there. And then we have his MC is in his ninth house in Taurus. Nothing else there except Eros. And then his 10th house, it has the sun, the north node, and Uranus all in Gemini in the 10th house there. So the sun in the 10th house, it's prominent, it's obvious, it's his career that he is noticed, and that is his destiny to be noticed, to be very smart like a Gemini as well. And then in the 11th house, we have Mercury and Venus and Saturn and Make and Psyche. So there's a lot of stuff there, like he knows people. You can see that he knows people, and he's good with words, he's good with relationships. His responsibility has to do with other people and being kind of in the loop and in the group, you could say. In his 12th house, he has Mars and Pluto, as well as Haumea in Leo. So his Mars being in Leo isn't a surprise. He can be kind of aggressive, but it's also like kind of hidden deep down there, which is really interesting, and I did not expect that for him. But I think there's some hidden aggression, and I think it's also towards something about this transformation. The transformation for him is in the 12th house. So that makes me think, which is interesting because you'll probably understand how I feel about Trump later in this video more. But what I think is so interesting is the moon in the 4th house, right on top of that south node. And then we have Pluto in the 12th house. That's like, he's meant to be a part of this transformation. He can't fully see the transformation, right? It's in the 12th house. But he comes from this spirituality and intuition, which is very interesting. And plus he's in this position of power, which you can see from his chart, actually. I don't think I've ever seen it more obvious. You have the sun in the 10th house in Gemini, and then you have Jupiter in the 2nd house in Libra. That's a recipe for fortune and fame, truly. So let's look at the aspects. You do have Pallas triactile Mars, which I think is just kind of interesting because his thought process is like to his aggression. So it's like he kind of has to check his aggression with his thought process. You have Eris quintile Uranus as well. And Eris is like, I always say it's like Mars's little sister because it's about aggression and it's like the feminine side of aggression. It brings out natural talents in his individuality and his uniqueness. So it's kind of like the quirky side of him is like this aggression. Like he's kind of like quirkily aggressive, which makes sense. Sedna is sextile his sun, so he is extremely good at seeing it, how he sees the picture. Sedna is about how you see the picture. Do you see a big picture? Do you see a small picture? Is it somewhere in the middle? however he sees it, he's good at it, and he obviously sees a bigger picture. Maybe not as big as we want him to, but he sees a big picture nevertheless. Pholus is opposite his Saturn. Pholus is about transformation, spiritual changes, and it's opposite his Saturn. So he's really meant to go through some form of spiritual transformation, sudden spiritual awakening. Pholus is also opposite his Venus, which means he's meant to kind of do this in a way that hopefully he shares with others for a beautiful purpose, I guess you could say. I find it interesting that Chariklo is trine his Mercury, because Chariklo is about caring towards gifted outcasts, nurturing gifted outcasts. Mercury is about communication, and I don't know, some people would be like, no, Donald Trump does not care about gifted outcasts, but this says a little bit otherwise, because Chariklo's quintile his Mars, it's biquintile his Uranus, it's square his Pluto. Like, there's this energy with him and gifted outcasts. I feel like with Pluto being in his 12th house, I mean, he needs to wake up and see stuff differently, and he could be a really beautiful person. Like, he has so much potential with this chart to do positive change. So hopefully he can wake up and realize this, because I feel like he's meant to. Humea is sextile his Jupiter. Humea is about spirituality. Jupiter is about philosophy. Like, those two go hand in hand in his chart. They work together really well. He just needs to embrace it, and it's going to be so freaking beautiful. Hygeia is trine his moon with an orb of just 0.01 degrees. Hygeia is about your attitude towards health, and I feel like that kind of means, especially because of where the moon is in his chart in the 4th house conjunct his south node, I feel like he could have been possibly like a doctor or someone who was in the health field in past lives. Juno is octile his ascendant with an orb of 0.00 degrees, 0 degrees, 0 minutes. Juno is the planet about marriage and boundaries in relationships, like your views on it. And Donald Trump is known for getting lots of women. And ascendant is about what people see, what you're known for, first impressions. So that's pretty interesting. It's right there in his chart that relationships and his views on marriage, possible, multiple marriages, is very prominent and apparent to the public. Juno is conjunct his Chiron as well with an orb of just 0.0 degrees, 6 minutes. So that's also very, very close conjunction right there. He's had a lot of girls in the past too, or, just a lot of partners in the past. Vesta, semi-sextile, his part of fortune with an orb of just 0 degrees, 4 minutes. His fortune and fame is what truly keeps him going, my friends. And then here we have Hygeia trine his south node and Hygeia sextile his north node. So that does kind of back up that I do think he was in that field in the past, but also it's kind of a part of his destiny to have a good attitude towards health in this life as well. And then we have Humea sextile his Chiron as well, which again is this spirituality sextiling what he's come from before. So like I said, he's been spiritual in the past, very deeply spiritual in the past, in his past lives. And that's a part of what has wounded him a little bit, is this like faith and trust in spirituality, I believe. So then we have Sun opposite Moon here. Interesting, just kind of, it's a powerful energy. And then we have Jupiter trine Uranus. That individuality that he brings, that uniqueness, brings him blessings. It works together hand in hand with his philosophy. Saturn quintile Neptune. So his responsibility, it brings out natural talents in his dreams. His unconscious works well with his responsibility. That orb is just 0.01 degrees. It's just 0.01 minutes, you guys. Venus is conjunct Saturn. His ascendant is quintile his Uranus with an orb of 0.04 degrees. That individuality, people notice that, brings out natural talents. Ascendant is octile Chiron with an orb of 0.05 degrees. So there is this energy there between his wounds from the past and what people see, but the energy is kind of like like some people can see the genuineness and some people cannot. I feel like is a little bit of what that aspect represents. And then MC is octile Mercury, just 18 minutes. So what his destined career is and how he communicates. Like, he can't communicate exactly how he's really meant to for his career, which makes a lot of sense now that I think about it, because people are not happy with how he talks all the time. MC is sextile Saturn, so this is an important responsibility career. MC biquintile Jupiter. The wealth helps him out in his career, brings out natural talents. His philosophy helps. North node opposite moon. You can't make this shit up, you guys. So his destiny, it has to do with his intuition, his spirituality, his moon in the 4th house. It has to do with like what he had before with this spiritual knowledge. Lilith is sextile Neptune, you guys. His hidden desires are very subconscious, possibly unconscious to him. He has these dreams, these spiritual dreams, that those are his hidden desires. I just don't think he's fully awakened to it yet because of those Pluto placements, like in the 12th house. His vertex is opposite his Saturn, like it's his responsibility to go through this change. It's biquintile his Mars. There's actions he's going to take that's going to help him to get there. It's biquintile his Uranus. His individuality is going to help him to get there. It's semi-sextile his Moon. His spirituality is going to help him to get there. However, the vertex is quincunct his North Node and his Sun, which means that how people see him and his destiny isn't quite helping for that turning point. He thinks he's supposed to be somewhere else than where this turning point is going to get him to get to where he thinks he's going to get to, if that makes sense. So let's look at Trump's Vedic astrology, sidereal astrology real quick. Using sidereal astrology, his sun is in Taurus and his moon is in Scorpio. Interesting. His ascendant is still in Leo, not surprising. And all the aspects are the same, you guys. It's just the signs kind of change. Like, instead of his 4th house being all in Sagittarius, now in Vedic, it's in Scorpio mainly, and then just a little bit on the edge is Sagittarius. Yeah, his 10th house, instead of it all being in Gemini, it's just a little bit in Gemini, but it's mainly in Taurus now. So yeah, let's look at his nakshatras real quick. His sun is in Mrigashira. Aww. His moon is in Jesta. His Mercury is in Ardra. His Venus is in Punavasu. Mars is in Maga. Ascendant is in Maga. IC is in Vishaka. Descendant is in Shatabisha. And MC is in Kritika. Very cool. Let's look at his draconic astrology real quick. So using draconic astrology, Trump's sun is in Aries, just 2 degrees of Aries. His moon is in Libra, just 0 degrees of Libra. His Mercury is in Aries. Venus is in Taurus. Mars and ascendant are in Gemini. So let's look at his aspects for draconic astrology. This calculator, I love it because it's the only calculator that I could find that shows you draconic astrology using the equal housing system, which I use for all forms of astrology. And usually I look at orbs 3 degrees or under, and like when I make videos like this for you guys, I only focus on the orbs that are less than 1 degree usually. But I do want to point this out because it's so freaking cool that Pluto is conjunct MC. His draconic Pluto is conjunct his natal MC, but the orb is 4 degrees and 55 minutes. Usually I don't look at that, but it's right in front of my face. It's the first aspect I saw, so intuitively I wanted to share that with you guys. There's so many cool aspects for his draconic astrology. Like, his draconic Pluto is biquintile his natal Chiron. It's trioctile his natal Neptune. His draconic Neptune is octile his natal ascendant. It's square his natal Chiron. It's square his natal Jupiter. His draconic Uranus is sextile his natal MC. It's trine his natal Saturn. It's quincunct his natal Mars. Like, there's literally so many cool aspects. So definitely, like, check this out. for yourself as well, but I just want to point out the coolest ones, the ones that seem the most significant to me, that just stand out kind of skimming through this real quick. So his draconic Saturn is octile his natal Uranus with an orb of just 0 degrees, 7 minutes, and that just means that, like, this responsibility that he's had from past lives, the draconic Saturn, is octile his natal Uranus. What is his individuality and uniqueness now? So it's like, to the responsibility. And I think that energy is very cool. His draconic Jupiter is biquintile his natal south node. The philosophy he's been through, it brings out natural talents in, like, what he's been through before. He's been through this philosophical blessings in past lives. His draconic Jupiter is sextile his natal MC. His career destiny this life, it has to do with, it works hand in hand with his past life philosophy. His draconic Jupiter is biquintile his natal moon. His spirituality, his intuition now, it's connected to the philosophy from past lives. This is interesting in a different sense. His draconic Jupiter is conjunct his natal Venus, and for some reason, intuitively, I picked up on that he has definitely known some of his lovers this life from past lives. His draconic Mercury is opposite his natal Chiron. His draconic Mercury is sextile his natal Uranus. It's opposite his natal Jupiter. It's trine his natal moon. His draconic Sun is trine his natal Lilith. And that, to me, means, like, what he was known for in his past lives, that's his hidden desires now. His draconic Sun is biquintile his natal Mars. The actions he takes now, it like, the natural talent is there based off of what people knew him from in past lives. His draconic North Node is quincunct his natal ascendant. So there's this weird energy there with how people see him now and what his destiny was in past lives. It's like some people can't get past this, like, facade that he puts on now, and they can't see what's hiding underneath. And also, it's like there's this weird karma from what his destiny was in past lives. It's like, is he going to achieve that now? Because the ascendant is such an important part of your birth chart. I always like to kind of call it your earth sign, because it's like, boom, that's where earth was lined up to. The horizon was lined up to, like, in the stars. So it's like when you were born, it's like, that's like your earth sign, you know what I mean? His draconic ascendant is octile his natal Saturn. So what he was known for in past lives is now his responsibility, and it's like, His draconic MC is opposite his natal ascendant. Whoa. His career destiny in past lives, that's what he's known for this life. His draconic MC is quintile his natal south node. That's what he's come from past lives, this career destiny. It brings out natural talents in him. His draconic MC is square his natal Lilith. It's his hidden desires to have this career destiny that he had before, but it's square. So it's like he isn't achieving it how he wants to yet, because once again, he has interesting Lilith energy. He hasn't fully tapped into these hidden desires. It's interesting. Some people's hidden desires are not so hidden. Like people who have their Lilith in the first house, it's not a hidden desire. It's just a desire that's very well known to all other people. But his Lilith, it's in his fourth house about what he's come from before. But then if you look at his other placements, what he's come from before is pretty hidden to him. Like his Chiron, it's in the second house. His Pluto, it's in the 12th house. Like he can't really see that because Chiron, it's like camouflaged for him by money and success and all of that. Like he hasn't tapped into his Chiron, his Pluto, what he's come from, his Lilith, like his hidden desires, because his hidden desires are so deep, he hasn't accessed that fully yet. So his draconic MC, it's quintile his natal moon. This is the last aspect we're going to talk about, and then we're going to get into past lives. But so what he's come from, this career destiny he's had before, brings out natural talents in his spirituality and in his intuition and how he feels when he's alone now, how he feels when he's alone. He wants to bring out those natural talents of this career success because a part of him knows that he's meant for this greatness because he's come from it before. Let's see what Joe Biden and Donald Trump have been in past lives. Here's some screenshots of Joe Biden's galactic astrology charts if you want to pause and take a look or take screenshots. And then here is Donald Trump's galactic astrology fixed star astrology chart if you want to take a look or take screenshots of that as well. Okay, now we're going to get into Biden and Trump's past lives using galactic astrology. In case you don't know what galactic astrology is, it looks at the fixed stars, so stars that don't move in our lifetime. They stay in the same spot for a long, long time in the night sky. And I believe that the fixed stars that, for instance, are in this online calculator, there is life around. And people have had past lives, they have parallel lives, or they will have future lives there. Some places are more of a hotspot than others. Some places are more of a hotspot back in the day. So that's why when you look at people throughout history, they've had lives in places like Tau Ceti and Lapis and Formalhaut. And while I believe you still can have lives there currently, because I mean, it's all happening at the same time, but on a human level, is what I'm talking about, this time scale, okay? On a larger being, higher dimensional being time scale, everything's all at once, but on a human level, yesterday was in the past, tomorrow's in the future, so that's what we're kind of focusing on right now. Hotspots now are like the Pleiades and Sirius and Arcturus. Hotspots in the future are going to be Lyra and Vega once again, because it's going to come back and better very soon. Tau Ceti, I believe, is going to make a comeback as well. But let's get into Joe Biden first. So I did make a TikTok video. In that TikTok video, I said that Joe Biden and Donald Trump have 23 connections that I pinpointed through this online calculator to these fixed stars in this calculator's system. Of course, there's more connections, but this is what we're going to talk about today, are these 23 connections that they both have. 21 of them are actually very similar. Donald Trump, for instance, has more stars that are in the Orion constellation, but Joe Biden has some of them as well. So I just counted that as like one that they kind of have in common. But we're going to talk about what they each were in their major past lives that I'm picking up on. So the two things that Joe Biden has that Trump doesn't have in his chart, Joe Biden has Altair in the constellation Aquila, and then he has Thuban in the constellation Draco. We're going to get into that. I know, mind-blowing. We'll talk about it. Donald Trump has Orion Nebula. Joe doesn't have that. And Donald Trump has the Andromeda Galaxy. Joe doesn't have that in his chart. So, intuitively, Joe's major connections are to the Pleiades, Hydra, Thuban, and Altair. So we're going to talk about this first. What is his Altairean connection? Because stuff happened in Altair, some really dark stuff. And when I think of Altair now, I think of, honestly, probably the most angelic star I can think of. It's Altair, because there is a huge collective consciousness that resides there. That's their physical location to have this energy. I feel like stars are energy, we're energy, consciousness and thoughts are energy. Therefore, collective consciousness physically manifests as something, as a star, as a black hole, as the galactic center, which they both have connections to, as well as most of us as well. Anyways, so in Aquila, the whole constellation, they were very into traveling and looking for like resources, exploring specifically to look for resources. And when I think of Aquila, I think of a place relatively similar to Earth, okay? Aquila is right by Vulpecula and Cygnus, and I like to think of all of those kind of in a group. And I don't think Vulpecula or Cygnus are in this online astrology calculator. Just Aquila is out of those three that are close by each other. They're actually close to Lyra and Vega as well. A lot of Lyran refugees went to Cygnus and Aquila and Vulpecula, but that's another story. Anyways, Aquila, even out of those three, is like the most like Earth. Vulpecula is a little weird. I did a whole YouTube video on Vulpecula because I have a huge connection to there. Cygnus is a little quirky. I feel like Joe Biden also has a connection to Cygnus, but like I said, it's not in the calculator. And I think that's where a lot of Joe's clumsiness and quirkiness comes from. And that's just interesting. But Aquila with him is another major connection, because in his life in Aquila, he was pretty well known, I believe. He was in a higher up elite setting in Aquila. This is where the majority of his karma comes from, because in Aquila, like I said, they were exploring. They were groups that would go out on these spaceships, I believe, and go to these planets, and some of the planets they found, they thought that they were uninhabited. They seemed like there was no real intelligent life on them. This is the download I got doing readings for clients who have connections to Aquila. I do as well, but I found this information through clients who had a connection to this event. So Joe was there during this event, and they would go to these places that they thought were uninhabited. They would strip them of their resources, and that in and of itself, I found, has karma, because then that planet that you stripped of its resources, it doesn't evolve to be what it was kind of designed to be, really, is the download that I got. And sure, there's you could argue that, like, well, maybe they were meant to go there and they were meant to get the resources. In this case, no, they were not. In this case, it was a slight kind of violation of, like, I don't want to say free will, because it did get to that point. So it was like a slight violation of free will at that point. They were like disturbing the destiny of the planet, kind of. And people were already kind of against that. But it wasn't a big deal yet. People knew that they were doing that, and they didn't see as much wrong with that. Like, most people in the community, in Aquila and Altair, they didn't see an issue with stripping resources, because they were like, no one's there, we need the resources, bada bing, bada boom type situation. They were cool with that, most people at least. It's kind of like how we eat animals, and most people are cool with it, but then some people are like, oh my gosh, no. That's kind of how it was there. But then it also got to the point, Joe was aware of this. Joe did this. I believe this is what I'm getting in Aquila. They started to use people as resources. And for some reason, I'm going to get emotional about this. Gosh. So they were using actual live people as resources. And it's kind of like in certain TV shows and movies. Like, I think of like the TV show The 100, where they use people, like in Mount Weather, if you've watched the show The 100, they take like their blood, they bleed people, so they are able to live type thing. It's also like in Jupiter Ascending. That's what this is really like. That's definitely what this is really like, because it was so they could live longer. They called it beauty treatments in Aquila back in the day, I believe. So it made them look younger. It was like a little fountain of youth type situation, but it also let them live longer. That's what they were doing in Aquila. They were using people as resources. The public was not made aware of this. And then it was kind of like Botox, how like some people would go and get Botox. However, it was more readily available. It was more people were doing it than people doing Botox now. I feel like more people are doing this beauty treatment to look younger, and then it actually let them live longer. And then the news came out. There were freedom fighters who were like, hey, it's not just like water that they're putting on us, that they're putting in us. It's people. Like, they're infusing us with other people. We are killing people so that we can look younger and live longer. And Joe knew this. He didn't care. He was like, hey, this is the best resource we can have. These lesser beings. He didn't see them as equal. And there's a ton of people involved with this. It's not like it was single-handedly Joe Biden in his past lives. This is a huge thing that a lot of people were involved in. And a ton of people on Earth were involved in this and have karma from it. They might not have been on the quote unquote negative side like Joe was, I believe back then, there was a lot of people who were fighting for the freedom of it once they heard about it. But once the news broke out, this is actually how Altair in specific, but also like all of Aquila really, ascended and became higher vibrational, was through this, I believe, which is really, really interesting. So as soon as people were like, hey, disclosure, it's people that they're using as a resource, everyone was like, we're not okay with this. They ascended. The people who, I'm going to tap into this a little bit and see what happened to Joe Biden. He was kicked out. So yeah, Altair ascended. Everyone who was like, whoa, we're not okay with this, they ascended. Because I haven't really seen it from the fully, I don't want to say fully negative, because I don't believe in positive and negative. Everything just is what it is, but there's higher vibrational stuff and lower vibrational stuff. Joe, in this situation, was in a lower vibrational position. He's had a lot of great past lives, you guys, honestly. But this one, it's the main one, is very negative. I mean, very low vibrational, let's say. So I've never seen it from this perspective. I've seen it from the perspective of people who knew a little bit and they changed their minds and they were like, whoa, yeah, that's not okay. Joe, didn't do that. He got kicked off. His vibration could not sustain to live on Altair anymore. He was thrown off, booted out, and it's really fuzzy as to like how exactly what that process was. I'm not in a high enough vibration right now to tap into that with my little human brain. But I do know that is what kind of, I don't know if it physically booted him to Draco. I think he kind of went to that space in between lives, and then he was a part of this reptilian consciousness. And I hate like saying that reptilians are low vibrational, because I have had contact experiences with extremely benevolent and high vibrational reptilian beings. But yeah, it's no secret that it's a low vibration usually. So that is how Joe got involved with the Draco Thuban energy. Because I do want to say that Altair is 0 degrees 1 minute square his moon. And then Thuban is 0 degrees 2 minutes orb trine his part of fortune. So that's just like, how is he going to achieve fortune and fame? Through this reptilian influence. So I believe it's fairly recent actually, and I don't think that this Altair thing is like super ancient. I mean, it is fairly recent, but it's not super recent. But the Draco connection with him, it's like I don't want to say it's semi-fresh because it's been going on for a while, but it's not like this ancient connection. Because with Joe, he has a huge connection to like the Pleiades, which was like really positive. Like, I don't think he really did anything quote unquote low vibrational in the Pleiades. Like, he had just like great basic and like Pleione and Maya and Taygeta and Alcyon, like scientific lives, just being like a veterinarian, I believe. He like worked with animals and he got into technology a little bit and like science and stuff like that. But he's had like just these good kind of basic ordinary, I guess you could call it, but yeah, amazing lives in these other star systems before he got involved with this negative influence and kind of went dark, you could say. But let's talk about the other lives. So he has a connection to Alphard in the constellation Hydra. And this is another, like, intuitively I pick up on as being like kind of a main connection with him. And when I think of Alphard and Hydra, like, I do think that there's some form of Egyptian connection there, because I see these like partially underground temples with irrigation systems and these big like boa constrictor looking snakes slithering through these temples. But Joe I see as this like humanoid looking guy, and possibly even girl as well back then, because I think it was multiple lives in these places, multiple lives in the Pleiades, multiple lives in Hydra. I do believe most of them were male though, just a couple female, more so male for sure. But anyways, in Hydra I believe he's been male and female, and he was like a priest and a priestess, and it was kind of weird. I feel like he was in the temple a lot, but he also went outside quite a bit, and there was like these beautiful waterfalls, and it kind of reminds me of Beta Centauri a little bit, which he has in his chart as well, Alpha Centauri and Beta Centauri. And you guys have probably heard that's like the star system closest to our star, the sun. So it makes sense that a lot of us here have connections to Alpha and Beta Centauri as well. But yeah, Beta Centauri is more of like the brains behind the operation of Alpha and Beta Centauri. I believe Joe has had more lives in Beta Centauri, but I do believe he's had a life in Alpha Centauri as well that he just wasn't as much aligned to. But the Beta Centauri people, they were like, they were the ones coming up with all the calculations. They were like, what's it called when you do the number thing? Accountant. That's what a lot of people in Beta Centauri, I believe, were doing. But it wasn't just like accounting. It was like accounting and scientific research. Like they were the ones doing all of the responsible things and like the architectural designing that then the Alpha Centauri people executed, I feel like. So Alpha Centauri was kind of more macho. I believe they are taller and just, I don't want to say less mental capacity, but like they had less of a understanding for things than the Beta Centauri people did. Alpha Centauri was more living in the moment, doing the physical labor. Beta Centauri, they thought more about things. And it was more peace, love. I mean, Alpha Centauri was peaceful too, but it was more of like a macho man kind of vibe, I feel like. And anyways, those are some other lives he's lived. He has a connection to Regulus in the constellation Leo. His connection to Regulus, this is gonna sound so weird, but I feel like the zodiac the zodiac signs, they're constellations in the sky. And the archetype of that actually is kind of what the beings who live there really like embody. Which I have recently discovered this information the past couple of months doing readings for clients. So Regulus, I do believe lions from Lyra, because in Lyra I believe there's human-looking beings, there's lion-looking beings, and then there's kind of a mix, part human-looking, part lion feature-looking as well, or just cat features as well, feline features. But in Regulus, it was like the lions from Lyra, the ones who look like really like full-on lions, but intelligent lions. I believe some of the refugees went to Regulus, and so there's these lion beings in Regulus, but they were more so about like, that's the only place that like I can think of that has like perfume is like Regulus, and like these robes that like they had in Lyra as well, but they were beautified in Regulus. And it was like Regulus was all about like, yes, being in like a position of power, but I feel like they were literally like, they might have even like done like acting and like entertainment things in Regulus, which is literally sounds whack, but that's what I pick up on for real. And it's probably the weirdest place I can think of. Another weird one is Fomalhaut in the constellation Pisces. I feel like they had these part human looking, part fish looking beings. And Joe was there as well. Like the face was kind of like a fish, had legs like a human, but then it had like gills on like its torso, so they would like walk into the water, they could swim around. That's where they spent most of their time. Very low maintenance type of beings, like they would eat the algae and then they would like relax on the beach, and that's like the life. A lot of people have had incarnations in Fomalhaut, especially people who have had incarnations in Sirius, and Joe does have a connection to Sirius A and B in Canis Major. Sirius, it's very watery. I believe there's a Sirius A, B, C, and D. Joe, I feel like, has definitely a connection to A and B. I feel like he's been a sea creature in B. And then in A, like a hominoid being who did a little bit of like the Syrian mystery schools, learning about manifesting and kind of like vibrational sound frequencies is the big thing in Sirius. That's why people go to Sirius from all over our galaxy as well as the Andromeda galaxy. And even galaxies beyond, people come to Sirius to learn about sound frequencies and energy healing, because yes, they have that all over our galaxy and Andromeda galaxy, but Sirius, this is like where you learn about the sound frequency aspects. because, you know, you can make something appear out of thin air through thought, like anywhere. But Sirius is where they chant to bring the souls in. When they know someone is going to be born, it's not the same way as on Earth. Like, the beings there gather around in a circle where they feel this new energy coming in, and then they chant to not only welcome in the new soul, but like physically form the body through the sound frequencies, through the beat of the drum, through the chanting, through the singing, all of that. That's why Sirius is so cool. And Sirius B, that's where like it's more the water creatures, so you got the dolphins, the whales, heck, the otters probably, and fish, and mermaids, and mermen, all that. He also has a connection to Procyon, which I feel like is a pretty major connection as well. Procyon is in Canis Minor. Procyon beings get confused with Pleiadians all the time. So do beings from Altair. So do beings from so many places because they look like humans, they look like Pleiadians. Procyon, same thing, but they're more muscular because they're all about health and fitness and all that. Joe also has Arcturus in the constellation Boots, which is another like pretty popular place to have had past lives. Arcturus is a stargate, meaning that when we die, I believe we go to a stargate, either Arcturus or Antares, which I guess we'll talk about next. But yeah, that's like a main thing about Arcturus and Antares is that it's like the space in between lives. I mean, once you go into the light, I believe that light is the stargate if you choose to cross over into it, and then you get your life overview where you see what happened, and then you have a being to help guide you to pick a next life. So I feel like if you've had a life in either Arcturus and or Antares, you've worked a stargate before at least once. I feel like everyone does it to see what it's all about. Joe, I feel like he did it a few times, but like this was in more of, I guess you could call it his glory days, back when he was ordinary. Believe it or not, Joe Biden's glory days, I feel like, were when he was ordinary, when he was living mainly in the Pleiades, life after life after life, because he loved it there. Arcturus, a little bit, tried it out, thought it was cool, thought that, like, just walking around in a park, there's a little bit of water there, I believe some grass there, very peaceful in Arcturus, and he got to experience family life. Arcturians, they're very family oriented. However, they also depend on the Arcturian. Like some, they don't have kids, but this is really a collective theme I see is like some people, they go to Arcturus and they're all about their career. Some people, they're all about their career and they have a huge family as well. And some people, it's just they go there to have a huge family and work the Stargate. Joe was kind of a mixture. And then he's also, usually if you have a connection to Arcturus, you have a connection to Spica, which is in the Virgo constellation because they're really close together. So Spica, it really reminds me a lot of Vega, which kind of sounds cliche because Vega and Virgo kind of sound alike, but that's what I think of is Vega and the constellation Lyra. And Joe also has a connection to Vega as well, but when I think of Spica, I think of Vega in its glory days before it went super tech-based. So when it was just like oak trees and the beings looked more Lyran and they weren't blue yet, they were like this gold, kind of like art teacher vibes, I guess you could say. Yeah, but we'll talk about Lyra for a little bit, I guess. So Vega is a star in the constellation Lyra. Vega and the rest of Lyra, their culture is very different, and that's because Lyra is very ancient. Vega is the brightest star in Lyra. Therefore, Vega had time to evolve separately from the rest of Lyra. And that's why they went more technology-based. I feel like the Greys are kind of a future timeline version of Vegans, just a little off-branch group of Vegans who went super tech route, genetically modifying themselves route. And I mean, most of our galaxy has Lyran genetics. I also believe Lyran genetics are Andromedan genetics because I believe that the Andromeda galaxy seeded the Milky Way galaxy and they pretty much start off with Lyra. And so Lyran genetics, our whole Milky Way is designed really by Andromeda. And a lot of us have connection to Andromeda as well. So Joe has this connection to Lyra. And it's mainly, yes, Vega too, but it's mainly like Sulfat, Eldafar, and Shalaic. Shalaic is like a big one for Joe. And I do think he was there during its destruction. And I do think he went and he had all these lives in the Pleiades because that's where a lot of the Lyrans went, but he also, that's why he went to Cygnus and Aquila, was to see, so where did the other groups go? That's why he went to Sirius, which this is like a really popular thing, is like if you were there during Lyra's destruction, a lot of people will go to the places that the Lyran refugees went because, I mean, one, genetically, you have to. You don't have to, but it's the best match. So genetically, it's a good decision to make. I think that was more so why Joe did it. I don't think it was for like a soul mission. That's why most people do it, is like for kind of like a sentimental thing as well as genetics. But I think Joe, it was more so of a genetic thing and a little bit of curiosity when it came to some places, but it was more so just for like his benefit physically than it was emotionally, if that makes sense, which I hadn't picked up on that before, but it definitely makes sense genetically. So I think that's more so why he did that. Joe also has a connection to M57 Ring Nebula, which is the nebula from our view, which is, I believe, kind of like behind the Lyra constellation. And nebulas, they're a collective consciousness, right? We're energy. Like I said before, stars, galaxies, they're energy. Black holes, galactic centers, they're energy. Nebulas, they're energy. And then, so he has a connection to Nile in the constellation Lapis. And when I think of this, I think of two things: wolves and whales for some reason. So through past clients, I've discovered that, and actually when I had my own qhht session done on me where I saw some past lives, I saw this place with multiple moons, more of like a blue sky, mountains for sure, and lakes as well, where I was a wolf with someone else that I know in this life as well. We were in a wolf pack together, and it was kind of like what you would think. It was kind of like Twilight, how it was like a wolf pack on Earth, but like higher vibrational, I guess, and the telepathy was super strong between us and whatnot. And you would still howl at the moon, still have those same like survival instincts that wolves have, kind of like that. I think it's Nile and Lapis. After years, I finally put a star to that memory and that experience. So that's where I think it is. I also think there's whale beings there, or I mean there was, because they didn't have enough water there, and the whales put out this call like, hey, we need more water. We either need more water or we need to leave and stop incarnating here because we don't have enough water. Well, the water didn't come, so they chose to stop incarnating there. That's what I believe happened anyway. Just kind of a random piece of galactic history. But yeah, Joe has a connection there to the wolves and slightly to the whales. I think he's like spoke to them a few times, but yeah, random. And then he has a connection to Capella in the constellation Auriga, and this is a star that I've dove into recently more than I have in the past. So Capella, I believe it was more of a hotspot back in the day, but I do think that there were like human-looking beings there, and I think it was like a lot of water. Like people lived on boats there, like how some people will live on boats here on Earth, but it was like that's how you lived in Capella. However, I do think Capella is more so of like an angelic headquarters now. Capella, Polaris, and Spica are like angel headquarters. Like I think you can have physical lives there like how I described, but it's more so of like a collective consciousness and a physical spot for like beings who want to do like angelic work, watch over people. Then they kind of put their energy back there as like a headquarters type situation. Let's talk about Aldebaran. Aldebaran is a star in the constellation Taurus. Joe does have a connection to Aldebaran, and Aldebaran reminds me a lot of Altair and Aquila, that whole situation. So Aldebaran went through a dark time as well, but Aldebaran's dark time was like kind of Nazi-like, is how I describe it, because they would basically look at groups of people and be like, you don't belong here. And I do think they like attempted and probably did execute them, just like the Holocaust. It was a very similar situation to that. I also believe that Adolf Hitler has had lots and lots of lives in Aldebaran, and that is very similar to that energy. Like that is the same Aldebaran energy. I also want to point out that Aldebaran is one of the most highest vibrational stars now because they overcame that dark time very, very similar to what happens in Altair, just a different situation. Instead of using humans as resources to live longer, it was like Nazi situation. So I also think Joe was there during that dark time. This is another theme he has. So his, I guess you could call it his soul theme was chasing the right genetics for him. And then like he had great lives, and especially the Pleiades I think is like the main one that he enjoyed the most. But then Altair and Aldebaran are like these situations he's been a part of, okay? And now it's happening again on Earth. But anyways, in Aldebaran, I do think he was a part of that like Nazi agenda. However, in Aldebaran, I do think he changed his mind just enough to be able to stay. So like when they ascended, once the news, this is different though. It wasn't like there was any news to come out. Everyone knew it was happening. But everyone in their mind, this is how it changed in Aldebaran. This is what I've seen working with clients, tapping into the akashic records. So in Aldebaran, all of these individuals got this thought like, is this right? Because like everyone went along with it. And it was just little thoughts in their head like, is this right? Is this effed up that we're doing this? And once everyone had questioned it, that's when, boom, they ascended. Because they knew that they would be comfortable not doing that. Once everyone questioned it there, once that thought was in everyone's mind, like, is this the right thing? That's when everyone ascended. And there was a few people that I think were moved somewhere else, but I think Joe, in that situation, I do think he got to ascend then. And timeline-wise, I don't know if it was before or after Aquila. It feels like they were happening at the same exact time. And like I said, everything always is. But I really think even on a linear timeline, I really think that those were parallel lives too. Like I really don't think one was before or after. I think it was kind of like this path or that path. You ascended in Aldebaran, you didn't in Altair type situation. So that's really interesting. And then he also has a connection to Polaris, which I said was kind of like an angelic headquarters. However, in Polaris, it seems more kind of Land Before Time dinosaur type vibes, kind of like Jurassic looking. A mix of like a Jurassic looking place and like a Native American village, because they're very family oriented people in Polaris. They look human, but with I don't know what other kind of features. It's just kind of different. Maybe like Avatar. It's kind of like Avatar there a little bit. Very family oriented, but a little bit Jurassic. I guess Avatar is a good description, but they're not blue like that. They're more so like autumn color, fall color, like orange, red, green, brown, yellow type tones. Beige looking. Anyways, Antares, the other Stargate, Joe has a connection to as well, in Scorpius, and I feel like this connection is definitely way stronger than his connection to Arcturus. Arcturus was like probably just a one and done type thing. Antares has been multiple lives. Antares and Joe, they do have a really strong connection. And I feel like Antarian beings for the most part are like very loving. They look, their skin is more bug-like, okay? And I didn't explain how our Arcturians looked either, but it's like bald, sort of like the stereotypical alien, pointy chin, kind of a bit larger of a forehead, but Arcturians are kind of like a bluish, greenish, purplish, similar to the physicality of a Syrian. However, Syrians and Arcturians, I feel like, can be light beings if they want to, like a blue light being. Antarians, their skin is more so buggish, like a brown, maybe a little bit of green, maybe a little bit of gray in there. But Antarians, like, I don't know, it's just different. They're more physical, I believe, than Arcturians. And some of them, I think, have, like, antennas. I have a very strong connection to Antares in a parallel life, I believe. And I don't think I have any antennas. But I do think some people in my family who have had lives there as well have had antennas. And I feel like Joe did as well. And I do think he was like a warrior, kind of a soldier type being there, worked the Stargate a few times, but he was in kind of the more darker, it's not like he was doing any dark things, but it just wasn't like super light things. You know what I mean? Like, he was more of a warrior soldier in Antares. That's where he's had his soldier lives, his Antares, for sure. As well as like Hyadum 2 and Ain in the constellation Hades. That was more of a hotspot back in the day. I do feel like he's had these like kind of pleasant, similar to his Palladian lives there. But I do think he was there when it started to like get into like its war era, and he slayed some dragons, because if I think of like a fairy tale place, it's Hades. Like, it reminds me of just like stuff that happens in fairy tales happen in Hades. Like damsels in distress being rescued, it happened in Hades. It's also like similar to Orion. Joe's had lives in Orion as well. He has aspects to Bellatrix, Betelgeuse, and Mintanka. Not as many Orion lives as Trump has had by any means, but I do think Joe was there, and I do think he I don't want to say this word, but it's coming through that he was kind of like he was like a female dog to some people in Orion. I feel like Joe Biden was their bee. Like, he was working for them, he didn't care. This was after Altair and Aldebaran. This was very recent. This is during the Draco influence as well, but this was like, you need to prove yourself, you're the new guy in jail type vibe. Yeah, I think Joe got slapped around in Orion kind of like he does on Earth, and he was like their puppet. He did whatever they told him to do. Very similar to Earth. Joe's connection to Mintanka is interesting because Mintanka is like this beautiful water world in Orion that reminds me of Sirius. It's separate from the rest of Orion. Even during the times of war, like, Mintanka was peaceful. Like, people went there for vacation. There was mermaids and mermen there. I think Joe might have had a merman life in Mintanka, but I also feel like he got to go on a vacation there, and that's like what his main connection is. I've never seen this. I've never seen someone's bee in Orion before, like Joe was. Like, he was literally doing stuff for them because he had to survive, and I think they let him go on vacations in Mintanka. That's so weird. Like, I've never seen anything like that before in the records, but that's definitely what I'm getting, is in Orion, Joe did whatever they told him to do. Also for Biden, he has the Andromeda constellation. So like I said, there's an Andromeda galaxy, there's also a constellation. Joe doesn't have the galaxy, he has the constellation, which is interesting. It is very connected to Antares because Antares is a stargate. It's a stargate for the Andromeda galaxy as well. Like I said, we don't see the galaxy in Joe's chart, but we see the constellation, and the constellation is like a little mini sliver of the galaxy, which is interesting. So Joe has a connection to Myrach, Almach, and Titouan. And in Andromeda, I believe Joe did like similar things like what he did in Altair, minus the using people for resources type situation. So that's interesting. Like, I do think he got to fly around in spaceships. I do think a big part of Joe is that he was like, think of like Star Trek, Star Wars, like piloting a ship. I do think he was a pilot in Andromeda. And when I think of Andromeda, I think of flying spacecrafts at very high speeds. Like, that's like the main thing I think of. Like, when I drive my car really fast, I'm like, oh, I feel a connection to Andromeda right now. I don't know why, but I feel like a lot of people did that, and that's why it's so common when you look at people's past lives and you see Andromeda. I mean, sure, I've had clients where I'm like, yeah, like, you had this like motherly, you know, you stayed at home type thing and did that stuff in Andromeda. You can have lives like that in Andromeda. You can have lives doing a variety of things in different places, but there was such a high demand for people to be in spacecrafts exploring as Andromedans because, like, they seeded the galaxy, and the Andromeda constellation is like the Andromeda galaxy's kind of headquarters in the Milky Way type deal. So that's why there's like a high demand for that. And that's what Joe was doing in his lives in the Andromeda constellation. So he also, this is the last like physical connection we're going to talk about for Joe, Tau Ceti. Hotspot back in the day. It's going to make a comeback soon. Get ready. This was just kind of like a basic few lives. And like I said, like, older people have had a connection there. I don't see, and it's weird, but I think it's because of, like, people talk about the waves of volunteers. I think that's kind of why we see, like, old presidents, if you look at, or, like, even, like, Marie Antoinette, there's, like, a huge connection to Tau Ceti, in my opinion. Like, George Washington, there's a huge connection to Tau Ceti, and it's, like, I don't know, like, parents, grandparents, you see, older people, when I look at their galactic astrology. And I mean, sure, some people who are like my age or younger, but it's like, it's more of like the wave before, like the indigos, I think, have had lives in Tau Ceti, and now the crystal and rainbow children, it's like we've just had different kind of a different wave of past lives. And like I said, everything's happening all at once, so like obviously anyone could have had a past life in Tau Ceti, but I just, for some reason, I find it more so with, like, the older generation. That's all we're going to talk about for Joe. We're going to get into Trump now, which I'm super excited to do. He has, intuitively, a strong connection to Orion, Arcturus, Alpha and Beta Centauri. But I want to talk about Aldebaran first because, like, yes, I definitely picked up on his Orion and Centauri connection. But for some reason, Aldebaran, I've just picked up on for him for longer. And like, Joe has a strong connection to Aldebaran too, but Trump, it's different. Like, Trump, I wish I could sense exactly what happened in Aldebaran with him before, but I do think he went along, like I said, like we talked about with Joe, that there was this Nazi narrative, this Nazi dark time in Aldebaran before they ascended and it became the super angelic star that it is now. Trump was there during this Nazi time, and I feel like in Aldebaran, I think his family, like his ancestors, I think were a part of kind of like this governmental structure. So I feel like he was kind of like a prince in Aldebaran, which I didn't know that they had there. But like, I feel like he's been a part of this genetic lineage like for a while. Like, this Aldebaran thing with Trump, I feel like is kind of recent. Maybe that's why I'm picking up on it. However, maybe it's more ancient than I sense. I don't know. But like I said, everything happens all at once. But this, I don't know, it feels kind of ancient compared to like the Orion and the Centaurus, but this Aldebaran, it's really deeply rooted in him. And I do think he was just kind of born into it. You know, I believe we choose our lives, so he chose to kind of be born into it, knowing that there would be this stuff to overcome. But I think, like I said when we talked about Biden, in Aldebaran, this stuff happened, this Nazi-type situation. They were killing people simply because of the type of group they were a part of, that they saw that they were a part of. And then once everyone got a thought in their mind of like, are we doing like something wrong? Like, is this a wrong decision to make? Once everyone got that thought of maybe this isn't cool, maybe this isn't right, that's when everyone ascended. I feel like Trump questioning that was like such a catalyst in Aldebaran for some reason. I don't know why him thinking it like affected so many other people. I don't know if he talked about it a little bit, and that's kind of what helped people change their mind about it. But it was like he went along with this because he was bored into it. But then once he questioned it, it was like, whoa. So that's his connection to Aldebaran. And I mean, he has, compared to Joe's like small orbs, he has Aldebaran. Trump has Aldebaran 1 degree sextile his Pluto. That's a small orb for him. He doesn't have any 0 degrees 1 minute or 0 degrees 2 minutes. He has like 1 degree, and then he has for example, like Hiatum 1 and 2 is just 0 degrees 17 minutes trine his Neptune, so he has a connection to that. He has Arcturus 0 degrees 19 minutes square his Saturn. He has Vega 0 degrees 22 minutes square his Chiron, which is super interesting. Then he has Pleione 0 degrees 11 minutes square his ascendant. So we'll get into all of those, but Aldebaran is a major connection. I want to talk about Alpha and Beta Centauri. That's another major connection he has. So it's funny because, like, when I think of Trump, I think of him as very Alpha. And I think like he's had a lot of lives in Alpha Centauri. And when I think of like intelligent people, and I do view Trump as, a lot of people disagree, but I view him as an intelligent person. Like he knows what he's doing, but he does have this kind of dumb side of him that does stuff without thinking as much. So he's had lives in Beta Centauri, and people call it Hadar. That's like all love and peace and beautiful and waterfalls, and the minds behind the operation. They're the ones making the designs for the Alpha Centaurians to build. But Trump has had more lives in Alpha Centauri, doing the physical labor, building the stuff that the Beta Centaurians designed. He was the one relying on people to, do the stats and figure out how much food they had for their civilization. Like, the Beta Centaurians helped the Alpha Centaurians live. They could not have lived without them successfully. So it's interesting to me that Trump has had so many lives there, like relying on other people, because when you think of him, you think of how he's the boss making all the big moves, but it's like he's had so many lives in Alpha Centauri where he was the one who chose to have a life there. He chose to not have as large of a mental capacity as, say, the Beta Centaurians, and he chose to just like have fun and build. Like, he had that playful, I don't want to have to worry about anything in this life, I just want to like build and have fun. So that's cool about him, I guess. I wouldn't have really, I've always intuitively felt it, but it's like you don't expect to intuitively feel that about Trump. Then his other major connection is Orion. So let's see what the heck happened in Orion. So he has aspects to Mintanka, Alnilam, Messiah, Bellatrix, Betelgeuse, and Rigel, and that's like all the stars in the system, besides Alnitak, that you can have aspects to in Orion using this computer system. So Trump has had so many lives in Orion. They're all so prominent. I do believe he's been a merman in Mintanka, the water world. And then he was very, very heavily involved in the Orion Wars. So, like I said, all of these places, like, I'm like a huge connection to Rigel, I want to say, but then it's like Messiah too, Betelgeuse too, Alnilam too, Bellatrix too. So it's like very involved. I feel like Rigel is the biggest major one for him for some reason. I feel like that's the hot spot where he was, and he did different things. Like, I feel like he was an inside man during some of this, if that makes sense, which a lot of people did. A lot of people in like the Black League resistance fighters, people call them in the spiritual community, trying to overthrow the negative Orion Empire. Some of them would try to work their way into the empire and be workers for them to get inside knowledge to try to overthrow them. Trump did that a lot. And I do think people know that about him. Some people who are in like the higher ups, even now on Earth, know about people's past lives. In Orion, they had that ability too. So some of them would know, oh, this dude's here again, trying to overthrow us again. I feel like that happened to Trump, and that's happened to like a lot of people I've given readings for. And when I say a lot, I mean like I don't know, I mean a few, but it's a lot in the grand scheme of things. Anyways, so it's common from what I've seen, at least. So he's also had lives in Orion, I believe, before the wars. This is where it's like this genuine connection with Orion for him, because it wasn't like he went there like most of us on Earth now during the wars, kind of like a prep for Earth. But I mean, of course, at the time it was like for Orion, to help Orion. But he was there before the wars. That's why he has a connection to the Orion Nebula as well, which Joe doesn't have, because Trump was there just to hang out and have fun and have a relaxing, peaceful life and play with the insects and the animals and outside. And I feel like also his family in this life, during like his genuine before the war connection to Orion, I feel like his family was involved in these transportation systems that they have in, I believe, Orion, where it's kind of like tubular, like you kind of go in a tube and you can go from this planet to the next planet, because Orion is huge. So they had like a transportation system within Orion, kind of like a subway, but like way more high tech. And his family was like higher ups. So I actually have a friend who the YouTube video I wanted to film this week was going to be with him explaining what he saw when I gave him a qhht session a few years ago about this life where, and he's a black man now on Earth, but in this life, one of the first things he said was like, I have like white people features, like but I'm like this kind of like glowing gold color, but like I have like a white person nose and stuff. So that was just super cool. I wanted to do that video this week, but we'll have to do that. I don't know when, because it's another story. But in Orion, I feel like his family was in a position of power, so they were this kind of like gold shimmery color, and then he inherited that once he grew up in Trump's past, in this particular past life in Orion, because like I said, he's had a lot. So that, yeah, that's probably his major connection is Orion, as well as Centaurus. And so then another major connection for him is Arcturus, which is a stargate. And even though I'm saying this is another major connection, this is getting into the less major now. But because, like I said, those ones were so prominent that we talked about before. But so Arcturus, Stargate, huge connection to the Stargate. He also has a connection to Antares. So Trump worked the Stargate, though. Like, I feel like he helped guide souls. This is this higher part of him that he's not as tapped into anymore because of recent things that have happened to him that kind of knock him down and make him in this survival mode, fighting for the good, but forgetting how good the good can really be, I feel like, if that makes any sense. In Arcturus, like, that was his passion, was working the Stargate, as well as Antares. I feel like in Antares, he was involved, kind of like Biden, in some of the soldier aspect of Antares, but with Trump, it was more so for the cause. Like, he knew why he was doing it. Like, he worked the Stargate. He had connections to guiding souls to see what should your next life be, playing God, if you will. But then also it was like, I know what I need to do because I've seen all of these situations and thoughts in these people's minds when I go over their life overview, and I've seen all these amazing places, and I know, the depths of the intel of the universe and the galaxy, and I want to help fight for what's right. I feel like that's at his deepest, most soul level, that's like Trump's mission, is fighting for what's right. That's like one of his soul themes. But he gets knocked down by the higher up elites. So he comes from this line, which I'm not exactly sure if it's good or bad. Some people, like I said, it's high vibe and low vibe, and some people in his family are high vibe and some are a bit lower vibe. But on his highest soul level, Trump's high vibe. So he also has a connection to Spica. He has a connection to Capella and Regulus. Trump and Regulus, why is that so fitting? And then he has a connection to Polaris. He has a connection to Fomalhaut. He has a connection to Hyades 1 and 2, and in the constellation Hyades. And Trump, I believe, Hyades 1 and 2, it reminds me of Orion. Trump was there, kind of genuine, before stuff went down in Hyades. He was there, enjoying life, you know what I mean? And he has also had primarily male lives, but the couple of female lives, he's had some in Hyades, and he's had some in Spica. So in Hyades 1 and 2, like I said, this is the place where fairy tales kind of play out. And yeah, he, instead of slaying dragons like Biden, I feel like, has done, Trump has been the one rescuing the damsels in distress, because that is kind of a reoccurring theme with him, is, yeah, he's had a couple lives of settling down a little bit. In Arcturus, I think he's had a family. But for the most part, like, he didn't ever really settle down. He was always kind of a bachelor, a player, but not with bad intentions. Slightly, maybe a slight selfish intention with just getting the romantic partners. But, like, I don't know. It wasn't anything like super malicious. It was just like, I think a lot of it on a higher level for him, a lot of it was like he feels a connection with all these different people, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, we all have multiple connections. And I think he just has always really embraced that. So he's seen as a player. Then he also has a connection to Tau Ceti, and he is going to be a big part of the comeback, actually. Like I said, Biden has a connection to Tau Ceti. I don't see him as being a part of the comeback. Trump, his connection to Tau Ceti is much deeper, and he's going to be a part of like the rebuilding of Tau Ceti, because it's not as much of a hot spot right now. It's kind of on the back burner, but it's going to make a comeback, and people are going to start incarnating there more again after we build Lyra and Vega, because Trump has a connection to Lyra and Vega. He has a big connection to Lyra and Vega, and I mean, so did Biden. But Trump, it's like he's gonna be a part of rebuilding it more. Once again, like he's gonna be part of the rebuilding of Lyra and Vega after Earth. Like, obviously, he's a big part of the Earth project right now. I don't want to talk about it too much, but yeah, he has a connection to Alphar and Shalayek and Vega in the constellation Lyra. And I do think he went on the tech route a little bit in Vega. And then, yeah, like a sliver of him went down that tech route and went down it. That was kind of his dark side, was going down the tech route in Vega. I definitely think so. But also he's had these awesome lives. I do feel like he's been a male lion before in Lyra. I feel like he chose to see the destruction of Lyra from a distance. He wasn't super close. And I don't even feel like he was on a spaceship relatively far away from the, like, explosions. I feel like he was really far away for some reason. He chose to see it from a great distance away, kind of like he knew it was coming. He was one of the first ones to hear about we're being attacked, or we're about to get attacked, or the missiles were fired or something like that. He was one of the first ones to get away. I don't know if that's because his family was higher up and they heard about this and he was on one of the first ships out and that's how he got so far away, or what, but it's very different than the other people who I've tapped into who were there during the destruction, who, even if they got away on ships, it's like Trump was way farther away than those ships that I've seen before. So that's the only thing that comes to mind, is that he was one of the first to know about it. He also has a connection to the Ring Nebula, which is, from our point of view, the nebula, I believe, behind Lyra. And then let's see what other connections do we have here. So he has a connection to the Andromeda constellation, the stars Mirach and Alpharaz. And I do think he's also played out that piloting role, that commander of the spaceship role. But then Trump also has a connection to M31 Andromeda Galaxy. Trump was what some people call a blueprinter. He helped, I believe, design this galaxy. He helped design the Milky Way. And that's super powerful. There's a ton of people. It's not like it's just Trump and like these special people who helped design the Milky Way galaxy. So many of you watching have helped design the Milky Way galaxy, I bet. It's really not an uncommon thing, because we're in an abundant universe and we're in an important time on Earth. If you're incarnated here right now, you have a very good chance of being like a blueprinter who helped design the galaxy. Trump also has a connection to the Pleiades. So he has the stars Maya, Alcyon, Taygeta, and Pleione, the same stars as Biden. Trump doesn't have as strong of a connection to the Pleiades, but it is still pretty strong. Like, he's had some good lives there. I feel like he got into more of like the spirituality in the Pleiades. And that's also why he went to Sirius for a bit. But Trump I see as a Sirian A being, not Sirian B. It's interesting. I feel like he has been like some animals before, but like he didn't incarnate as a dolphin or a whale in Sirius. Like a lot of us have. So I always kind of ask, yeah, no. For Trump, no. It was a human in Sirius A. And it was for the mystery schools. He got really into it because he was really into diving deep into the knowledge. And I mean, so was Biden. But Trump, it was like, it wasn't just to like have a relaxing life, and it wasn't like just a little bit of curiosity. It was like a lot of curiosity, and it was like a real like, I'm gonna read all the books, I'm gonna listen to all the higher up masters. Like, it was very he respected the culture a lot, just more than the average person who went to Sirius A, which I think is really interesting. He also has a connection to Procyon and Canis Minor. And Procyon, like I said before, Procyon beings get mistaken as Pleiadians all the time because they look very similar. Trump's connection to Procyon is really strong, stronger than his Pleiadian connection. And the Procyon beings, they're more muscular, they're more well built, they're taller than Pleiadians for the most part, because like I said, Procyon beings, they're all about fitness, dieting, health, extending their life expectancy without using other humans to do so. Like, it's about just health. And I feel like maybe that's where that like health doctor connection comes into, because I feel like Trump was really, really interested in that in Procyon. Like, he was a doctor in Procyon, possibly on Earth as well, because Trump, I feel like he's been on Earth like quite a bit as well, honestly. He got the rundown of it. He wasn't just gonna come here and be into politics right off the bat. Like, he needed to experience it a bit more than Biden did. I feel like Biden kind of lived more elemental lives. Definitely, he's had some human lives on Earth. But Trump, he's always been more of a hominoid creature. Whereas Biden, he's been animals more, and he's been elemental beings more than Trump has. It's not like he's been them a lot, because Biden's had a lot of human lives too. Mostly human lives, probably. But he's had way more elemental lives and animal lives than Trump has, in my experience. I feel like Trump has been a dog on Earth, and maybe an elemental, like, for a little bit, but definitely not as much as most people have. I feel like most people have had more elemental lives than Trump's had. He's always been very humanoid, I feel like, is the form he likes to take. And so, yeah, he has a connection also to Nile in the constellation Lapis. I feel like Trump, I feel like he was a whale being for a little bit, I think, because him being a blueprinter, him being someone who designed the Milky Way galaxy, he feels a lot of responsibility for it. That's why he has this soul theme. It all comes from he was a blueprinter. Like, that's the reason he went to the places he went to. It was because he felt, I mean, sure, sometimes a curiosity, but he wanted to know really boots on the ground what was going on there. He wasn't chasing a good genetic match. I mean, like, he always chose to be human, but I think it was because he felt like he could do the most as a human. I think he wanted a new perspective when he was a dog. I think, yeah, like, he wanted to just do as much as he could, really with good intentions. And it's not like Biden's intentions were always bad. They were just sometimes selfish. Like, his soul theme overall is kind of selfish, whereas Trump's is more genuine. And that is simply tapping into the akashic records, honey. Like, that's all I'm gonna say about it. Like, when he was a whale being, it was because he heard this call of, we need more water, or we're not gonna incarnate here. Which, it just, the reason I laugh when I say that is because from an akashic record perspective, it's very interesting, it's very random, but it's popped up for me and a few times, because that's just, you know, I'm sure if they had other stars in the system, I would be able to tap into more stuff, because just knowing a star name, seeing in astrology a connection to a certain fixed star, it sparks my intuition to tap into it. And when I see this Nile in this Lapis constellation, I'm like, I get this random piece of knowledge about the whales. And so I feel like he was a whale for a little bit to see what the heck was going on. Why the heck are we getting this random energetic call like this? Like, Mayday, Mayday, we need more water, we're not going to incarnate here anymore. It sounds silly from a higher perspective as an angel getting that message, but when you're a whale being, it's like, yo, It's serious down here. So he went boots on the ground to see what was up. He was a whale being for a little bit. He understood, and I think he just kind of solved the issue, like, well, don't you want to experience something else other than, like, keep incarnating as whales? Because I do feel like it was there was these same people who, like, kept being whales, and of course there was some people who wanted to experience being a whale, so they went there, but he was like, there's other places where you can be a whale, you know? You don't have to, like, have these few friends. Like, there's probably better places to be a whale. Like, I feel like we should just, you know, go somewhere else instead, and I think he just kind of talked to them and helped them decide, okay, let's just, like, stop incarnating here then and go somewhere else where there is more readily available water instead of, like, bringing the water here. So anyways, then he also has a connection to Alphard and Hydra. Not as strong of a connection as Biden has to Hydra, but Trump, I feel like he's been there. I feel like he helped more with, like, the building of the temples. I wanted to say irrigation systems at first because it felt like more building, and that was the first thing that came to mind, but no, it was more so the actual temples, the actual structures of the temples, which makes sense because how did the temples get there, right? But I've never tapped into anyone who actually built the temples there, so that's very cool. That's what he was into, and it makes sense because in Alpha Centauri he was like a builder. So yeah, that, I believe, is all of the physical connections for Trump and Biden. I also want to point out that they also have, both of them have a connection to the galactic center, the supergalactic center, the Shapley attractor, and the Great Attractor, which those four things are all like a collective consciousness. The galactic center is what it sounds like. It is the center of our Milky Way galaxy. So many of us have an astrological connection there. Even if we don't have an astrological connection there, we just have an energetic connection there without the astrology, right? Because we're in this galaxy, therefore our collective consciousness is a part of that. But people who have an astrological aspect there just have a greater sliver of their energy there, I believe. And then the attractors, they're what they sound like. They attract other space to them. It's another collective consciousness group. So yeah, that's just what I picked up on for Biden and Trump's past lives. I don't want to talk anything about politics. I'm sure you can see a little bit about how I view them as a person. It has nothing to do about how I view politics. I am someone who is very against, like, earthly politics in general. I am just for the benefit of everyone, and most politics, like, try to destroy that and twist that, so I'm just not for it in general. I want to build a community that's all peaceful, without relying on governments or big corporations, and just be self-sufficient. So that's my views on that, in case you were curious. But if you want to get put on my wait list for a reading like this, but about you, because it's so not fair that I just gave Joe Biden and Donald Trump a reading, but people were interested in it, and I was really, like, motivated to do it because someone asked me on TikTok. My TikTok is sydalexandria if you're interested. I'm also on Clapper, which is like TikTok, but it's not TikTok. It's sydalexandria on there as well. So check that out if you're interested, because like I said, I posted a 3-minute version of this on TikTok weeks ago. So I hope you guys have an awesome week. If you want to be put on my wait list, email me, sydalexandriaegypt@gmail.com. I am behind on YouTube videos. I'm very behind on readings, but I am going to try to have more time soon to get to this because this is what I love to do. Thank you guys so much for watching. I know this is a long one, but I mean, it was cool because this is like what we talk about if you get a reading with me, with other, like, questions and more personal stuff to dive deeper into, like, specific questions as well. But that was just kind of an overview of what I picked up on from their astrology. So